Welcome back to another episode of Green Disruptors, where we spotlight the trailblazers shaping a cleaner, more sustainable future. Today's episode is all about food, not just about what's on our plates, but what gets wasted behind the scenes. I'm joined by Jessica Regan, founder of FoodMesh, a Canadian company on a mission to eliminate food waste by connecting surplus food with those who need it most. With a background in impact strategy and entrepreneurship, Jessica has built a powerful digital platform that's rescuing over 1 million meals a month while helping businesses, charities, and municipalities create smarter, more sustainable food systems. Get ready to rethink what you know about food waste, business innovation, and social impact. This podcast is brought to you by Mountaintop Social Marketing, a growth partner for companies in green tech. Enjoy this episode. All right, here we go again. Hi, Jessica.
Morning.
Welcome back to Green Disruptors, everybody. I'm going to have a really interesting conversation for you today about food, all of our favorite things. So, Jessica, tell us a little bit about you and the company.
Yeah, good morning. So my name is Jessica Regan. I live in Vancouver, BC, and I started a company called FoodMesh about 9 years ago. And it was in response to a problem that I think affects every single person on this planet, which is food waste. And so for those who don't know, between a third and half of the food that we grow is wasted along the supply chain at the household level. So this is at a time where we have a huge amount of food insecurity. So our FoodMesh was born with the premise that there's not a food shortage problem, there's a disconnection and connection problem. So the idea of FoodMesh would be to create this network that connects surplus food with new markets. And it is a digital platform supporting an ecosystem of different food businesses and governments to help give food a second chance.
Wow. So I'm curious, where were you personally that gave you the confidence to try to come up with a solution for this problem?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I was working in a different field. I was doing a lot of work with governments and First Nations on strategic planning and natural and energy projects up north. But this is, I've had several businesses in the past. This would be my fourth business. And initially I was looking for somebody else to run it. I knew what it was going to take. And the idea was that, like I said, there's such an enormous problem with food waste. And when my friend of mine had a compost company, he sent me pictures of trailer loads of product. It was avocados and onions, and it was perfectly edible food, but it was too ripe for retail. And even he rejected it because of the stickers that were going to clog up the machine. So it ended up in the landfill. Every once in a while you learn certain facts, almost inconvenient, that you just can't shake off.
Yeah.
And so I really started to do the research over about a year, and I realized that this is something that I did want to tackle. So I don't have a background in, food systems and technology. So it was a bit ambitious to take this on, but I surrounded myself with really intelligent, committed people. And we have been working on it day after day for the last 9 years.
Crazy. That's amazing. So tell me give us a broad overview of what it was like in the beginning compared to all the things that you're offering and doing now, 9 years later.
Sure. Yeah. So, when you start a business, you need to start with the problem statement. And the problem statement was there are companies that have food that they have grown that don't have a market, and they are paying to waste this. And so we worked with one company and used them as our pilot. We were building out our MVP for that, and eventually we had to get some funding. And the idea was that if we're going to build this, it has to be a double-sided marketplace. And so we needed to build out the recipients, the charities, the buyers. And so it was a really difficult process because double-sided marketplaces have a high attrition rate. Then you're working in the food space, then you're working in the food waste space. So the odds were kind of stacked against us. But like I said, we were pretty resilient and persistent, and we just continued to troubleshoot every different barrier that came our way.
So, and then 9 years later, like how smoothly are things running, and like how big have you gotten?
Yeah, I've been really blessed, I guess you could say, by the amount of people that rally around you. When I feel like, I've been working in the impact space for nearly 20 years. I've helped businesses become B Corp certified, and really blend the heart of a nonprofit and the mind of a business, that impact social enterprise
Yeah.
space. And so I really find that if you're focused on something that is solving a problem for other people, people do rally. And now we are at a stage where we have a network of 2,500 organizations. We're working with businesses, governments across the spectrum, from local municipalities to provincial, regional. And we're rescuing about 1 million meals a month right now in terms of
Wow.
the impact that we're doing. And maybe just kind of back up. Ultimately, what we do is we do three things. We create matches. We're like a digital matchmaker for excess food at the supply chain. We manage it, so we make sure it's done safely, reliably, so that the grocery store knows that someone's going to pick it up. And then we measure it. So we have a huge data play where we are tracking that product, which we can go into detail about why the data is really important, both for the business and other stakeholders. But what we do is we build little networks around all of the food waste generators. For example, a grocery store. Every day they shrink out product that is nearing best before dates. That food is still edible, it's just not saleable. And so every day we organize charities, pre-vetted charities, to pick up that food on a daily basis, and they rescue that and then distribute it to their clients that are facing food insecurity. That's for the edible product. And then for the inedible product, we have other outlets such as farmers, zoos, reptile. There's all these kind of, unique outlets for this product. And it's based on the premise that food is not waste. Waste only occurs when there's no end user for it. And that's what we're seeking to solve.
That's a good new definition. Waste is no end user instead of just, this isn't pretty enough for us, so we
Totally.
have to throw it in the waste in the landfill. So I would love to kind of zoom in on like the singular level to see like, okay, so give me a product journey. Like, I mean, you kind of laid it out, but do you have any like really specific examples?
Sure. Yeah. So maybe I'll zone in on our retailer program, because that's the one where, like I said, it's excellent because it gives a steady supply of product for a network of end users. So initially we started with up the supply chain at wholesale, and we built a B2B marketplace to sell or donate that product. But what we found when we went to market was that it was volatile and unpredictable. That's not good for, recipients because they can't plan. It's not good for a business owner because I need to make payroll and I need
Yeah.
consistency. And so luckily I had, experience before starting this, and I know how to build good business models. And I know that predictable subscription-based revenue and anything that provides predictability and certainty is good for everybody.
So you know what
And
your MMR
so
is.
with the
Yeah.
grocery store, we piloted with a particular banner. They gave us 3 stores and said, here are the requirements for success. It's got to be reliable. It can't add more work to our stores. And they gave me all these different requirements. And so we did a pilot. We got some grant funding to kickstart it. And we were able to achieve all of those milestones for that grocery banner. And then they continued to give us more and more stores. And now we've rolled it out across all of their different markets. I think around 160 stores for that one particular
Wow.
customer.
So as far as the subscription model goes, who is paying you for the subscription?
Yeah, great question. So because the grocery store typically pays to get rid of that product, and that product, like I said, doesn't need to end up in waste streams. So we replace that with our fee. So we offer a management fee to manage their decentralized network of charities and farmers across all of their local markets. So whether it's a rural community up north or in the cities, and then we do a revenue share with our charities. And this is actually really important and core to our model. And the reason is kind of twofold primarily. One is all of the charities that pick up enter what they pick up into our app. And so what this does is it confirms service confirmation. So we know that somebody has done the job, they picked up on their scheduled day. And so they get between 4 and I think it's $37, depending on if it's weekend and what they're picking up. And so that allows to have predictable revenue for them. so that, they can pay for their drivers and they're not competing for the same limited grant pool that the other nonprofits are
Yeah.
competing for. So it alleviates that pressure point and gives them predictable revenue. And so those are the kind of the two main reasons why we do that. And so, yeah, we charge a monthly subscription for every grocery store that we manage.
And so is this typically comparable to what they would have been paying waste services before? Is it lower? Like how easy is that sell?
Yeah, another good question. So typically we try to either be net neutral or offer cost savings. And so we would work with their facilities manager to make sure they're right sizing and things of that nature. So it's not just coordinating their donations, it's also looking at their entire program and making sure that, like I said, they're adjusting things on their end to realize those cost savings.
Okay, very cool. So, I mean, in the beginning you had those pilot projects, and I'm sure that at this point you do have a lot of word of mouth. So, where are you at in terms of continued growth and scaling right now?
Yeah, great question. So because we have an ecosystem, like I said, on both sides, uh, our growth is not so linear. We're working. Like I mentioned, we're starting to work with municipalities. We're working even with an agricultural credit union that finances. It's a national account. We're also building software for the food banks because they also need
Okay,
to
yeah.
create more harmonized reporting for their governance and their funders. So the growth that we've had is quite multifaceted, which also creates a bit of resilience and stickiness, right? Because you're starting to serve the different users of the network so that they become more reliant on that platform. And so our customer segments is quite diversified, but we still stick to our core offering, which is match, manage, measure. So just diving into the measurement piece, the data that we're collecting is becoming such high fidelity, and it's best in class in terms of what the data is being collected from other markets, even in the U.S. So because we work with the charities and get this third party, we have very high fidelity data, which is really interesting to governments who don't have a lens
Yeah.
into the IC&I sector, which is businesses up the supply chain. So municipalities have a problem. They have zero
Mm.
waste commitments and all of these, but they don't really know what
They don't
businesses are
even know
doing
what's going
because
on.
they're not
Yeah.
obligated to report that data. So long story short is we work with municipalities to build out food recovery networks, to collect that information, de-identify it so that privacy and there's protection with the data contributors. And so we're able to kind of show at a glance of what's happening across a jurisdiction or a regional a regional district.
Yeah. Okay. I could totally see how necessary that is. And you noticed a huge gap there in what they had available to them. That's pretty cool. So what would you say? I mean, it is interesting that it's happening in so many different directions. So it's definitely not a typical scaling story. So what would be maybe one of the biggest challenges to doing it this way?
So the challenges have changed over time.
I'm
I
sure.
would say that the challenges right now, again, continue to be businesses that still don't, that, it's status quo and inertia. I would
Mm,
say is by far the biggest challenge because a lot of people don't see waste as a problem. They see it as a cost of doing business. And they accept the fact that 4% of their total inventory is not going to be sold. And they just assume that the waste cost is
they
status
just
quo and it's
factor that
completely
into their
acceptable.
expenses. So it has, I'm sure it's hard for people to become the first adopter of something like this. So if they see their buddy doing it, they're much more likely. That's that's interesting. Yeah, like how broadly are people aware that you're a solution that exists? I mean, you've been around long enough that you probably have a name for yourself at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot, especially with these like larger retailers, in the States and in other countries. So the first one is having that leadership. So businesses that set those targets of 50% reduction or whatever it might be,
Hmm.
then it kind of filters down to the operator saying, oh, okay, I need to do something. I'm being told by leadership. So we are starting to see that in the last couple of years. Then, it's risky to invest in a startup. If you have a large enterprise and you've got, 2,000 stores across, the US, you don't want to invest in a company that, could become insolvent. So,
Yeah.
the fact that we've passed that, crossed the chasm and we're
Yes.
past we're a stable operator. Now we're starting to get those calls, and our inbound is growing quite a bit. I would say significantly year over year. Just because, again, you have to earn the respect, you have to earn that reputation, and that comes from just
Absolutely.
happy customers. And pretty much most of our marketing has come from our own customers, so proud of the program that they've run commercials and they have signage in their stores. They're very proud of the work. So
Okay, so they're
they
highlighting the fact that they're participating with you because it's good PR for them.
Yeah, and that wasn't initially. Can be a very sensitive topic. Not a lot of people want to talk about it, but the reality is that every food business wastes product, whether they admit it or not. And even though it's a few percentage points across the board, it adds up. And as I mentioned, almost half of the food that we're growing is wasted. Like, it is, from an economic perspective, social, environmental, whatever, lens you look at it, food waste
Yeah.
is just an absurd problem. It's a solvable problem, but it exists prolifically across the globe in every business you can imagine. So now that people are, I do find there's a shift. It's a positive shift, but we just really need them to act on it, not just kind of, talk about it.
Yeah, ooh, I think that's a good kind of angle to focus on for a minute is, what is the difference between, I think when someone is deciding to individually take a climate action, like putting solar panels on their roof or something, those decisions can be pretty emotional. But when it comes to businesses, it's a lot more pragmatic. So like showing them the cost savings, like in theory, that should work, but what are you finding as far as the tones of those conversations and what's actually pushing people over the line?
Yeah, it's a great question. It really, so with enterprise sales, complex sales, there's different buyers and they care about different things. You talk to the CFO,
Hmm.
that it's all about the bottom line. It either has to make money or save money. At the end of the day, it's got to fit on the P&L statement. It's very black and white, which is great.
Yes.
Then you work with corporate affairs. They care about the marketing, the brand reputation, the risk, all the what ifs that you have to reassure. And so it's harder to get these businesses, but once you start working with them, it like I said, the impact and it's really worth it. So it's worth going after these bigger
Yeah.
fish, but it is harder, and you just have to be able to speak to each of the stakeholders, their fears and what their goals are as part of their job or their mandate.
Well, and the longer you've been doing it, I would hope the easier it gets because you know what those fears are because you've heard them time and time again. And so you can package your solution into those statements.
Totally.
Yeah. Oh gosh, sometimes I just blank out. This is the time where I delete my whole sentence. Okay, so what's next in the coming year? Like, is there anything you're specifically focused on?
Yeah, great question. So, we have a few different divisions with our company. We just acquired the rights to this campaign called Love Food, Hate Waste. This really helps us in the prevention space because, we work with, there's a kind of a hierarchy of food waste. There's prevention, feed humans, feed animals, then compost. So we've kind of always sat in the like feed animals and feed humans. But we've never been working in the prevention space. So I'm super excited. We just launched it this year, and we're working with cities and governments to focus on the household food waste because 62% of the waste that's from the household level is avoidable. They're estimating about $2,000 per household per year is going to
Oh,
groceries that we
yeah.
don't use. So with
Well,
rising
that's more
prices and
relevant than
food
ever.
insecurity,
Yeah.
so this is an area that we've started this year and it's growing quite well. I'm super excited about that. Uh, on the data side, this is another area that is becoming more interesting because, sure, we collect all of our information and our data, and we've got really fantastic high fidelity data, but we're only one data stream. We represent such a small market share, and there's all these other intermediaries and folks that are collecting this information, and they're all in silos. And so some of the work we've been doing with different, government entities is, can we work with the different data contributors, be that third party so that we can, again, create that buffer between industry and government so that we're not sharing confidential information, but we're able to aggregate, de-identify, and tell the story of what is happening with food waste in our own backyards. Because it is of public interest. Food waste is one of the third greatest contributors of greenhouse gas as a country. It is between 8 and 10%. It is so bad from a methane perspective. So not to mention the social and so forth. So creating that data commons, that data marketplace is an area that we're getting, project by project, we're starting to build out that capability. I'm really excited about that. I think this will really help us demystify what's happening in our own backyards.
I love that. As a more of a marketing person, I was like, if you can combine that powerful data with imagery and storytelling, seriously, all you have to do is show me the picture of the truck full of onions, and you're like, are you serious? It's silly how disconnected we are, and when you see the imagery and you hear the data,
Yeah.
it changes things.
100%. And, that is, if there's any one positive thing or silver lining about food waste, is that it is a very unifying topic. It doesn't matter your political, your socioeconomic status, whatever your background is. I think every human on a human level can agree food waste is bad when there are hungry people. And so, like I said, there's a lot of momentum and groundswell behind this topic. There's more innovators that are coming to the space, more upcyclers. Like, the solution space is thriving. And so, you talk about the evolution of our business. Before, we were just a service provider, and we continue to provide those services for our customers. But now we see ourselves as, like I said, a solution aggregator. So our work with municipalities is, someone calls us, any business can call us for free, and we are going to listen to their needs, and we're going to connect them to a solution provider, even if there's a so-called competitor, because at the end of the day, we exist to solve a problem. And so we've really evolved between just being one of the solution providers to be that connector of the solution providers and provide that ecosystem view, which I think is an exciting space to be, but it is an evolved stage than we were just even 3 years ago.
Yeah, that's quite the trajectory. That's amazing. And I think being able to help people solve their problems, even if you're not the one getting paid for it, I think that's what we should all be doing. Like, how can it's just that problem solving mentality. And I think at the end of the day, you're still going to be successful in business, and people are going to be drawn to your brand because of that. So I think that's great. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. Thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for being a powerful woman example to all the female leaders out there. And it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much, Megan.
That's it for today's episode of Green Disruptors. Huge thanks to Jessica again for sharing her story, her passion, and the powerful work FoodMesh is doing to transform waste into opportunity. If you're a business looking to cut waste or a policymaker looking for real world impact models, I highly recommend checking them out at foodmesh.ca. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone who cares about sustainability, and we'll see you next time for another conversation with the real people driving change.